A cowboy gave shelter to a young Apache woman who had escaped captivity. The next morning, warriors came to his door, not with threats, but with a request. Soon after, armed men arrived with papers and orders. He found himself caught between two sides, and both believed he'd betrayed them. And it all started on that one day. Clint Holt hadn't spoken to another soul in near 7 years. Not since the day his brother died with a bullet in his spine and his ranch burned down to ash by men in government coats who claimed to be chasing renegades. Clint rebuilt what he could from cinders in silence, far from any town, in a stretch of Arizona so empty the wind forgot where it was going. But on that July morning, as he watered his horses by the corral, something caught his eye, a flicker of motion beyond the brush line. At first he figured it for a dying deer, or maybe a coyote dragging itself from a trap. But when he squinted into the haze, he saw her. She stumbled like the land was trying to swallow her, bare feet cut by rock and cactus. Her hair hung in tangled braids down her back, and her dress, if it could still be called that, was torn and stained with dust and blood. She collapsed 20 paces from his barn, too weak to cry out. Clint didn't ask himself questions. He just moved. He ran to her side and turned her over gently. She was Apache, young, no more than 20. Her skin burned with fever, and her arms bore marks, deep, cruel scars that looked like they'd come from shackles. Her wrists told the story even if her voice could not. She'd been a prisoner, and recently, when her eyes fluttered open, they were the color of midnight water, haunted, wary, defiant. She tried to pull away, but her body failed her. "Easy," Clint said softly, lifting her with calloused arms. "Ain't no one gonna hurt you here." She didn't believe him. Not yet. But she had no strength left to resist. He carried her to his cabin and laid her on the cot, fetching water and one of the healing poultices his mother used to make. All the while, he didn't speak more than a word at a time. He knew the value of silence. And he knew what happened when folks let their tongues outrun their hearts. She drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering in Apache. He only caught one word clearly. Yiska. Was it her name? A brother? A ghost? He didn't know yet. But he did know this. No one ended up in this stretch of the desert by accident. And whoever had done that to her, they'd come looking. And when they did, Clint Holt would be waiting. Because some men run from the past, others make it run from them. By the time the sun began to dip behind the hills, the girl's fever had broken. Clint sat in his old rocking chair, Winchester across his lap, boots unmoving. He'd watched over her for hours, his mind chasing shadows. Every so often her lips moved, half-formed words in Apache, maybe prayers, maybe memories clawing their way back through the pain. When she finally stirred and opened her eyes for real, they held less fire, more confusion. She tried to sit up. Clint leaned forward, stopping her gently. "You need rest," he said. She flinched at his touch. That told him enough. She'd known more harm than kindness lately. "I ain't here to chain you. You want to leave when you're able, I won't stop you. But for now, you'll die out there." The girl stared at him, breathing hard. Then, slowly, she whispered, "Nanton, he sold me." Clint leaned in. "Who?" She licked dry lips. "White man. Said his name was Colonel Morrow. Promised my uncle peace. Took me instead." Clint's jaw tightened. He'd heard of that name. Morrow wasn't a colonel anymore, not officially. But he ran a band of hired guns out of Prescott, called themselves peacekeepers. Others had another word for them, bounty rats, men who dealt in flesh, bullets, and lies. "They hunt you?" he asked. She nodded, just once. Clint stood, moved to the window. The wind had shifted, bringing dust from the east. "How many?" 50, she whispered. Clint's blood turned to ice. "You sure?" She nodded again. 50 riders. Bought men. White, Mexican, some half-blood. They chased me 2 days. I got away when one got drunk. Slit his throat. Took his horse. It died under me this morning." Clint turned slowly, his eyes dark as canyon stone. "You got a name?" he asked. "Sanaya," she whispered. "It means sweetheart. But I ain't been called that in a long time." Clint nodded slowly. "Sanya, you might have led hell to my doorstep." She looked down, ashamed. "You should let them take me. Maybe they spare you." Clint Holt laughed. A low, bitter sound. "They come for you. They ain't leavin'. Not alive." And outside, from just over the ridge, a coyote howled. as if it too smelled blood on the wind. The morning came slow and gray, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Clint saddled his mule, Old Buck, and loaded a crate of shells into the barn's hidden trapdoor. He wasn't a man who kept much, never had need for more than beans, bullets, and a roof to keep the sun off, but what he did have was ready for war. Sanaya watched from the doorway, wrapped in one of Clint's old ponchos. Her face was pale, but her eyes followed his every move with the sharpness of someone who'd been hunted too long to relax. "How far behind?" he asked. "They ride hard. Maybe a day, maybe less." Clint nodded, jaw clenched. "This place ain't much, but it's defendable. You run now, you won't make it far. That leg's still bleeding." She didn't answer, just looked out toward the east. Her lips moved like she was whispering to the spirits. And for a moment, Clint wondered if they were listening. "You ever shoot a rifle?" he asked. "Once," she said. "Killed a rattler that tried to crawl into my sister's cradle." He handed her his old Sharps carbine. "You aim for center mass. Don't hesitate. Men like the ones comin', they count on fear more than bullets." Sanaya took the rifle with careful hands, weighing it like she'd done it before. "They'll ride under a white banner," she said, almost to herself. "To make you think they come for peace." Clint shook his head. "White cloth don't mean nothing when it's carried by the devil." He moved to the edge of the porch, squinting toward the eastern ridge. And there, just barely, he saw it. A flicker of light, like a match being struck in the morning dark. Scouts. They were closer than Sanaya thought. Clint spat into the dust. Hell's already here. By high noon, Clint had spotted the dust plume, thick and wide, just like a cattle drive, only it wasn't cattle raising that cloud. 50 riders, maybe more, spread in a wedge. No colors, no flags, just men and guns and a hunger for something wicked. Sanaya stayed close to the barn, tending her wounds with moss poultices and old whiskey. She'd asked Clint just one question that morning: "Why help me?" He hadn't answered, not with words. But the truth was simple. He'd seen a woman shackled like livestock. That was all it took. Clint sat on his porch, polishing his long-barreled Remington, when he heard the first voice carry through the wind. "Holt! Clint Holt! You got something belongs to me!" The voice rang cold and theatrical, like a showman calling out the next act. Clint stood slowly and stepped to the edge of his porch, eyes scanning the horizon. One man rode ahead of the pack. His coat was Union blue but patched with Mexican silver thread. His beard was sharp, his eyes mean. "Name's Morrow," the man called. "Formerly of the Arizona Volunteers, now captain of my own enterprise. I'm here for the Red Girl. Apache property. Escaped. She's wanted. I got papers." Clint spit into the dirt. "You can take your papers and shove 'em under the saddle of whatever devil you rode in on." Morrow smirked. "You misunderstand. This ain't a request. It's a kindness. Give her over and we ride off. You get to stay alive in this pretty little ghost town." Clint raised his rifle and pointed it dead at Morrow's chest. "I buried my brother for refusing to hand over a fugitive. I don't plan on joining him today, but if I do, I'll make sure you're riding to hell right after me." For a moment, no one moved. Then Morrow's smirk faded, and from behind him, men began fanning out, 50 rifles cocking in unison. Sanaya appeared beside Clint, rifle steady in her hands. And Clint whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "We hold here. We don't give an inch." Because when a man's past comes riding back in the form of 50 guns, there's only one choice: stand or die. The standoff held for all of 5 heartbeats. Then Morrow raised his hand, and 50 men spread like wolves, circling the property. Clint watched their formation with a veteran's eye. They were disciplined, sure, but not cavalry. Mercenaries. Slavers. Opportunists. Paid in silver, not loyalty. Sanaya crouched behind the rain barrel, eyes locked on the draw where the riders had vanished. "They'll come from 3 sides," she murmured. "Push from the barn, flank from the hill, burn the house last." Clint nodded. "You learned that in a fight?" "I learned that in a cage." She didn't elaborate, and Clint didn't ask. Truth was already bleeding in her voice. Inside the cabin, Clint pulled up floorboards and retrieved 2 items: a coil of blasting caps and an old iron bell, salvaged from a mine years ago. It didn't look like much, but it sang like thunder when rung. "We got one edge," he said. They think this place is just another shack. Sanya raised an eyebrow. It's not? He gave a thin smile. There's a tunnel under the barn, runs out past the gully. Dug it after my brother died, in case the law ever came back looking. Her face hardened. And now it's not the law. It's something worse. Clint nodded, then opened a weathered tin box and pulled out 6 sticks of dynamite. You ever see 50 men stop at once? She stared at him. You will, he said. Outside, wind carried the faint whinny of a horse and the metallic clink of stirrups drawing near. Sanaya knelt beside the front door, rifle braced. Clint looked down at her. You ready? I was born ready, she said. I just didn't know what for. And then the first shot cracked from the ridge, and all hell broke loose. The shot rang out like a thunderclap. Clint didn't wait to see where it landed. He shoved the table on its side, just as 2 more bullets slammed into the cabin walls. Splinters danced like fireflies. Sania crouched behind the fireplace, rifle barrel steady through a crack in the stone. They're pushing from the orchard, she called. Clint cursed under his breath. The orchard was blind ground, thick mesquite and old pecan trees he hadn't cleared since the war. He hadn't thought they'd use it for cover so soon. A voice shouted from the east. Take the barn! Burn it if you have to! Clint's eyes widened. They'll find the tunnel. Sanaya moved before he finished. She slipped out the back, low as a shadow, her braid bouncing once behind her. Clint hated letting her go alone, but he had no time to argue. Another bullet crashed through the front window. He fired back, dropped to reload, and moved to the kitchen, where the bell hung on a rusty hook. He struck it with the hammer. Gong! The sound echoed like a cathedral cry, bouncing off every ridge and hollow. It was the signal. In the distance, 2 barrels of oil hidden near the north fence ignited with a roar, flames shooting high into the morning light. Men shouted in confusion. Horses panicked. Clint grinned grimly. The trap was sprung. Out by the barn, Sanaya had reached the back door, and just in time. 2 men were already circling toward it, torches in hand. She waited until they came within spitting distance. Then she stood. Her rifle cracked twice, clean and quick. Both men dropped before they could raise their weapons. But the third, hidden behind a stack of feed sacks, rose like a ghost. He charged. Sanaya raised her rifle to fire, but it jammed. Her finger clicked on an empty trigger. Too late. The man slammed into her, knocking the gun free. They hit the ground hard, her shoulder tearing against gravel. He pinned her, knife flashing from his belt. You're worth $50 dead or $100 alive, he growled. Sanaya didn't flinch. She reached behind her, grabbed a broken horseshoe, and slammed it into his temple. Once. Twice. He crumpled without a sound. She rolled away, chest heaving, blood dripping from her lip. Back inside, Clint heard the barn go silent and feared the worst. Then, 3 rapid knocks on the back wall. Their signal. She was alive. For now. But the smoke rising from the orchard told them both. This was just the beginning. Clint kicked over the stovepipe and grabbed his bandolier just as the back wall of the cabin rattled with impact. They were trying to break through with a battering log, smart enough to avoid the front where he'd made himself a target. He dragged a heavy crate across the kitchen floor and braced it against the door. Then he paused. Not fear. Calculation. Sanya burst through the barn tunnel seconds later, face streaked with dirt and firelight. They're splitting. 5 coming from the creek bed, 4 from the left ridge. I counted 12 in total. Rest are still circling. Clint nodded grimly. That means Morrow is waiting. Watching. She frowned. For what? For us to run. He tossed her a fresh revolver. Sanaya caught it, checked the chamber, and gave him a quick nod. No fear in her now. Just a warrior's stillness. Bullets punched through the window, one grazing the lamp, which shattered into flame. Clint beat it out with his coat before it spread. They want to flush us, burn us out. Outside, voices grew louder, bolder. One man shouted, You got 5 minutes, Holt. 5 minutes to send her out and walk away. After that, we're coming in, and it won't be clean. Clint stepped onto the porch, slow, deliberate. Rifle slung low, hands raised. He called out, What kind of man takes a woman in chains and calls himself a lawman? Laughter rolled through the trees. Morrow's voice answered, A man who gets paid to keep peace in this territory. And peace means keeping savages in their place. Sanaya stepped beside Clint, revolver in hand. And she shouted back in perfect English, If you think I'm afraid to die, Morrow, you picked the wrong Apache. The silence that followed was thunderous. Then came a single gunshot, deliberate, defiant, from the ridge. It missed. Clint raised his rifle and returned fire. And just like that, the second wave began. Smoke curled across the land, and steel began to sing its bitter song once more. The second wave hit like a thunderclap. Gunfire ripped through the brush, chewing up the front porch and driving Clint and Sanaya back into the cabin. Lead split the air, wood cracked like dry bones, and through it all, Clint's breathing stayed steady, measured like he was back on the battlefield again. They weren't trying to win with that barrage. They were testing defenses. Watching where the fire came from, marking where Clint stood. Sanaya crouched beside the window, her revolver empty. "Two down by the fence," she said, reloading with shaking fingers. "Third's limping. Left thigh." Clint nodded. "Then he ain't climbing out of this gulch." He moved to the back and reached beneath a floor plank, pulling out a long iron lever wrapped in cloth. He handed Sanaya a coil of rope and a tin whistle. "What's this?" "Old trick from the mine days," he said. "Creek feeds into the gully. They use it to water their horses. I rigged the dam years ago. Pull this lever and she breaks open. Floods the basin." Sanaya stared at him. "That'll drown anyone in the low trail." Clint's eyes were flat. "That's the idea." She looked at the whistle. "And this?" "Signal. You hear that blow twice, you pull the line and run. Don't wait, don't look back." Sanaya frowned. "What if they catch me before I get there?" He looked at her for a long moment. "They won't." Outside, the gunfire died down, replaced by low whistles and shouted commands. They were regrouping. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they flank again," Clint said, slinging his rifle. Sanachaya stood and holstered her gun. "Then let's make them regret every minute." She vanished out the back, low to the ground, swift as a ghost. Clint watched her go, heart heavy with unspoken words. Because something in his gut told him, only one of them might live to see the next sun. And it wouldn't be by accident. Sanaya reached the gully in time to see 3 riders cutting across the basin below. They hadn't spotted her yet, too focused on the crumbling trail that led behind Clint's cabin. One led a horse heavy with gear. Another laughed, careless and cruel. She crouched behind a mesquite bush, fingers tight on the rope attached to the dam release. Her breath came slow and shallow. She counted them again. 3 riders, all below the floodline. Clint's plan might just work, but only if she waited for the signal. Back at the cabin, Clint held the whistle between his teeth, eyes locked on the ridge. They were coming now. More than a dozen. Morrow had sent in the brutes, the ones who didn't ask questions before breaking down doors. Clint fired once, caught one square in the chest. Another shot whined past his ear, too close. He ducked behind the porch column and blew once, shrill, sharp, piercing. Sanaya tensed, muscles coiled. One whistle. Almost time. Clint ran to the other side of the cabin, fired again. The attackers were closing fast, boots pounding, hooves thundering. He caught a glimpse of Morrow himself, standing tall beside a mounted rifleman, watching it all unfold like a conductor at a symphony of slaughter. Then Clint saw something that made his blood run cold. Another group of riders, half a dozen, were moving fast toward the gully from the north side. They'd seen her. They'd figured out the trap. He had no choice. He blew the whistle twice. Sharp, urgent, final. Sanaya heard the signal, yanked the rope, and dropped flat. The sound was like 1,000 thunderclaps. The dam exploded in a burst of foam and shattered timber, water roaring like a beast uncaged. The flood surged through the gully, sweeping horses, men, and the laughter of cruelty all into silence. Clint saw it from the cabin. The rush, the screams, the chaos. And Morrow? He cursed. He cursed loud and long. Because now he knew this wasn't going to be an easy victory. This was war. Water roared through the gulch, tearing down trees, horses, and men alike. Morrow's line shattered, his eastern flank gone in seconds. Screams echoed across the canyon, then vanished beneath the churning flood. Sanaya, soaked and breathless, crawled to higher ground, her heart hammering like a war drum. She scanned the basin. 3 horses gone, 5 men, at least. The rest scattered like ants. She hadn't flinched when she pulled that rope. But now, watching the aftermath, the weight of it pressed on her like the thunderclouds overhead. She'd survived so much. But this This was the first time she'd chosen destruction. Back at the cabin, Clint wasn't celebrating. The men who'd survived the deluge were regrouping faster than expected. Morrow himself rode closer now, flanked by 7 mercenaries. Each wore the scars of old wars, and none looked like they cared about survival. Just the payday. Clint knew that kind of man. He used to be one. He stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand. No more warnings. No more talk. "Enough blood, Holt," Morrow called. "Give me the girl, and I'll leave what's left of you breathing." Clint's reply was a single shot, splintering the hitchpost inches from Morrow's foot. The warlord didn't flinch. "Fine," Morrow muttered. "Then we take you both." Sanaya appeared beside Clint, dripping and muddy but alive. "Flood cut their numbers," she said. "But they've still got more than we do." Clint gave her a slow nod. "We don't need more. We need one thing." "What?" He looked toward Morrow and his last wave of riders. A reckoning. The last battle was coming. It would be up close. Personal. No more tricks. No more traps. Just grit and gunpowder. And whatever strength 2 scarred souls could muster. The wind picked up. Dust and smoke curled through the trees as if the land itself knew what was coming. Morrow dismounted slowly. He unbuckled his coat, revealing the ivory-handled revolvers strapped to each hip. Well polished, well used. The kind of guns that had ended more lives than they'd ever protected. "Bring me the girl," he growled to his men, "or burn this place down." 7 mercenaries spread out, each one carrying enough iron to start a war. But they weren't rushing in this time. No, they'd seen too many of their own swept away. Now they moved like predators, careful, patient, cold. Clint crouched behind the porch rail, reloading. Sanaya sat beside him, knife in one hand, revolver in the other. "We can't stop all 7. "No," Clint said. "But we don't have to." He handed her a satchel. "Smoke charges. Toss one left, one right. You and I split the middle." Her brow furrowed. "That's suicide." Clint met her gaze. "So was waiting." He gave a half smile. The kind of smile a man wears when he's decided dying isn't the worst thing that can happen. Sanaya nodded. No fear in her eyes now. Just resolve. They moved together. Sanaya darted left, flinging the first charge. It exploded with a thunderclap, billowing smoke across the ridge. Clint tossed the second, then ran straight into the thick of it. Gunfire cracked, blind, wild. Clint's first shot dropped one man mid-yell. Sanaya circled behind the others, silent as a breath. Her knife flashed once, then twice. The third man never even turned around. Chaos erupted. Voices shouted. Horses reared. Morrow stood still, eyes scanning the smoke. Then he saw Clint. The 2 men locked eyes, 20 paces apart. And in that moment, the world fell silent. No smoke, no screams. Just one truth between them. This wouldn't end until one of them was dead. The air between them held the weight of judgment. Clint Holt, the loner who buried his past in silence. And Colonel Royce Morrow, the slaver-turned-mercenary, a man who carved his empire from other people's suffering. 20 paces. No more. Morrow unbuckled his coat, letting it fall into the dirt. "You sure you want to die for an Apache girl, Holt?" Clint didn't blink. "I'm sure I don't want to live in a world where men like you decide who's worth saving." Morrow smiled, slow and cold. "Then let's end this." Sanaya crouched behind a split-rail fence, watching, trembling, but not with fear, with rage. This wasn't just Clint's fight. It was hers, too. The sun broke through the clouds in that moment, casting both men in sharp relief. Dust danced like ghosts between them. Morrow reached for his pistol. So did Clint. 2 guns barked as one. Smoke curled upward. Sanaya ran forward before the sound faded. Clint stood, barely. A crimson line bloomed across his ribs, but his aim had been true. Morrow had dropped to one knee, blood pouring from a wound just beneath the collarbone. His right hand twitched, reaching for his second gun. Clint didn't give him the chance. Another shot cracked through the stillness. Morrow crumpled forward into the dirt. It was over. Clint dropped his revolver and fell back against the porch, breath ragged, face pale. Sanaya caught him just before he collapsed entirely. "You did it," she whispered. Clint tried to speak but coughed instead. Finally, through gritted teeth, he managed, "That was for your sister." Sanaya nodded, eyes wet. She looked up at the remaining mercenaries. Only 2 left now. They stared at Morrow's body, then back at the rifle in Sanaya's hands. They dropped their weapons and rode off into the smoke without a word. The wind settled. The smoke thinned, and for the first time in 2 days, silence lay over Holt's ranch. Sanaya helped Clint inside, his shirt soaked through with blood and sweat. He collapsed onto the cot where she'd lain not 2 nights ago, when she was the one fading, and he the stranger who'd chosen to care. Now the roles reversed, and the weight of that kindness pressed down like gravity. She wrapped his side tight with old cotton and whispered prayers in Apache, soft, rhythmic, ancient. Clint winced but said nothing. "You need a doctor," she said at last. Clint gave a bitter grin. "Unless you've got one hidden in your pocket, reckon you'll have to do." Outside, the yard was a ruin. Burned fence lines, shell casings, blood in the dirt. Morrow's body lay untouched, boots pointing toward the mountains. Sanaya stepped out and lit a torch. No words, just fire. She threw it onto the heap of gear his men left behind. Flames swallowed the slavers' weapons, the saddlebags stuffed with iron chains. As the fire roared, Sanaya tossed Morrow's ivory-handled pistols into the blaze. Some tools weren't meant to survive their masters. By nightfall, the sky blazed orange over a battlefield gone quiet. Clint stirred as Sanaya returned. "They'll come," he muttered. "Lawmen. Or worse." Sanaya nodded. "Then we won't be here." He raised an eyebrow. "We?" She sat beside him, eyes on the dying fire outside. "You didn't just save me," she said softly. "You changed me. And if we stay, they'll say we were criminals. Traitors. That you kidnapped me." Clint exhaled slowly. "So what do we do?" Sanaya looked at him, her gaze steady. "We disappear. Together. And we build something, where no man's coin or hatred can touch it." Clint closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he let himself believe there might be something more than survival. There might be a future. They left before first light. Clint rode slumped in the saddle, his side bound tight beneath a canvas duster. Sanaya led the mule, watching every shadow along the trail. The desert ahead was vast, but what lay behind felt even bigger. A graveyard of broken guns, scorched earth, and 50 dead men's intentions. They didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been bled into the soil. By midday, they reached a canyon rim where the scrub gave way to red stone cliffs and hawks circled high. Clint stopped there, breath short, gaze steady. "I buried my brother out here," he said. Sanaya said nothing, just stood beside him as he removed his hat. "We built that ranch together, thought we could make something last, thought we were done with war." She touched his arm. "You weren't wrong to believe in peace. You were just too close to the men who profit from breaking it." He nodded slowly. "Guess we both been sold one kind of lie or another." They built a cairn from dry stones and laid Morrow's silver badge atop it. Melted now, blackened by fire. Clint didn't know if it was justice or irony, but it felt like the end of something. Sanaya turned toward the southern horizon. "You ever been to Sonora?" Clint chuckled. "Once. Shot it 3 times. Fed once." She smiled. "I know a place. High in the hills. Old mission. Abandoned since the war. My uncle says the water's pure, and the sky don't ask questions." Clint nodded, thoughtful. "A place to start again?" She looked at him, the sun behind her shoulders, painting her like a vision. A place to live without chains. Behind them, the wind whispered through the rocks like the sigh of old ghosts. Ahead, the road bent toward the unknown, and together, they took the first step. The sun burned hotter with each passing mile. Sanaya led them down a forgotten trail that curved through saguaro groves and rocky outcroppings. The old mission lay 5 days south, tucked into the Sierra Madre foothills, far beyond the reach of telegraph wires or bounty lists. But some ghosts don't stay buried. By the 3rd night, Clint noticed the signs. Tracks along the wash. Horseshoes, one missing a nail. Cigarette ends, still warm. Whoever they weren't amateurs. They stayed just far enough back not to be seen, but close enough to keep pressure on. Sanaya noticed it too. She said nothing at first, but as they made camp beneath a sandstone bluff, she looked over the firelight and said, "They're not lawmen." Clint nodded. "No, these boys don't ride with warrants. They ride with contracts. She stirred the fire, jaw tight. Somebody must have paid for Morrow. And when he didn't show, they sent men to finish what he started. Clint cleaned his rifle in silence. How many you think? 3, she said. Maybe 4. One's got a limp. He walks with his left shoulder high. I saw his print back by the creek. He gave her a sideways glance. You always notice that much? She gave a grim smile. When you spend years in chains, you learn every detail of the men who guard you. The fire crackled between them. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote barked once, then was silent. Clint looked at her. We could double back. Set a trap. Sanaya shook her head. Not yet. Let them think they've got the upper hand. Let them grow careless. And then? Her eyes narrowed. Then we show them what a dying Apache girl and a half-dead rancher can do when they stop running. Clint smiled grimly. The hunted were becoming the hunters. They waited until the 4th night. Clint chose the spot, an old mining cut, half-collapsed and narrow enough that riders would have to dismount to pass. Sonia scattered broken pine across the trail to slow them further, then vanished into the rocks above with her rifle. They sat in silence as the sun fell behind the ridge. Then came the sounds. First the faint jingle of bridles, then the low murmur of men too sure of themselves. Clint crouched behind an outcrop, revolver drawn. 3 riders entered the pass, lanterns swaying. A 4th followed on foot. His shoulder sloped, just as Sanaya said. One held a sawed-off scattergun. Another wore a cavalry saber. All bore the dust and arrogance of men used to chasing prey. Clint let them come halfway through the narrows. Then he whistled, just once. From the ridge above, Sanaya's rifle barked. The lead rider toppled backward, his lantern crashing in sparks against stone. The others shouted, scattering. Clint stepped into the open, his revolver kicking twice. One man spun, firing wildly, then dropped to his knees. The 3rd ran for the rocks, only to meet Sania's blade in the dark. The 4th, the limping one, froze. He raised his hand slowly. Don't shoot. I'm just a scout. They paid me to track you. That's all. Clint walked forward, eyes hard. Who? The man licked his lips. Texas Syndicate. Out of El Paso. Morrow owed them. You killed him. They want it paid. Sanaya stepped beside Clint. And you? You believe in collecting blood for another man's sins? The scout hesitated. I believe in staying alive. Clint looked at Sanaya. Her nod was slight. They let him go. He ran fast, back the way he came. When silence returned, Sanaya crouched beside one of the dead and pulled a folded note from his coat. She read it aloud. Capture alive. Return to Paso. Bonus if Holt comes too. Clint looked out into the dark. This wasn't over. But now, at least, they knew the name of the next shadow. They rode at night now, traveling under the stars, guided by Sanaya's memory and Clint's instinct for danger. The desert grew hotter, the hills steeper. But their course was clear. They weren't just running anymore, they were heading to El Paso. Sanaya had made the decision. The syndicate that hired Morrow, men who dealt in flesh and fire, had to be stopped, not avoided. If she and Clint kept fleeing, others would pay the price. Other girls. Other families. Clint hadn't argued. He just loaded his rifle and said, we end it there. By the 3rd day, they crossed into Texas. Dusty towns blinked past, full of eyes that watched and said nothing. The kind of places where law wore a badge, but justice wore a blindfold. In one such town, Carrizo, they found what they were looking for. A barkeep, red-nosed and nervous, let the truth spill after enough coin hit his hand. Syndicates run out of the old Southern Pacific Depot, he whispered. Used to be a rail yard, now it's a fortress. 50 men, maybe more. Name you don't say loud is Rufus Trask. He's the one calls the shots now. Morrow answered to him. Sinia's grip tightened on her cup. And girls? The barkeep nodded grimly. Wagon loads. They don't stay long. Shipped out west or across the border. Ain't no lawmans dared step close. Clint stood. Then we won't be lawmen. They left before dawn, heading for the depot with just 2 horses, one plan, and nothing left to lose. As the first rays of morning cracked the horizon, the old rail yard came into view, half ruins, half barracks. A stone wall surrounded it, and sentries patrolled the roof like kings of ash. Sanaya studied the fortification. There's a sewer run behind those buildings. It connects to the old aqueduct. Clint gave her a look. You're sure? She nodded. That's how I escaped the first time. He stared at her. You've been here before. Her voice was cold. I was sold here. Clint said nothing. But as the sun climbed higher and the shadows shrank, his knuckles whitened around the rifle. The time for hiding was over. The reckoning would begin at sunset. They waited until dusk. The shadows stretched long across the yard as the last supply wagon clattered out through the depot morrow. Clint and Sanaya moved silently beneath the slatted boards of the aqueduct, their boots slick with sewage, rifles wrapped in cloth to muffle their clatter. Sanaya led, memory guiding every step. They keep the girls in the west wing, she whispered. Guards rotate every 4 hours, night shifts drunk by 10. Clint grunted. Let's give them a hangover they won't wake from. They emerged inside the depot just as the bell tower rang the 7th hour. The yard was mostly empty. Most guards inside for supper or cards. They struck fast. Clint dropped the sentry at the boiler room with a blackjack to the jaw. Sanaya cut the lanterns and opened the west wing locks. 3 girls inside. Young, scared, barely more than children. They didn't speak, just clung to Sanaya like ghosts recognizing their savior. Quiet now, Sanaya whispered. It's almost over. Clint handed them knives and pointed toward the shadows. Stay close. Run only if I say. Then the alarm bell rang. A shout. Then another. They'd been spotted. Clint raised his rifle and fired the first shot of the war. Sanaya grabbed a torch from the wall, lit the oil trail she'd poured from the boiler room to the stables. Flames raced across the yard. Confusion reigned. Men shouted. Doors flew open. Smoke thickened. Clint and Sanaya moved like smoke. Silent, fast, brutal. He gunned down 2 guards at the south gate. She dropped another through a warehouse window. The girls followed, clinging to each other, ducking low through flame and gunfire. From the main office, a heavy voice bellowed. Kill them! Burn the whole yard if you have to! Rufus Trask. Sanaya turned toward the sound, eyes burning. He's mine! Clint nodded once. Then let's finish this. Together they ran through the smoke toward the heart of the beast. The main office loomed like a fortress. Stone walls, barred windows, and the thick iron scent of greed. Inside, Rufus Trask stood behind a desk of polished walnut, 2 pistols laid before him like a gambler's last cards. He was a large man, soft in the middle, but hard in the eyes. The kind who built an empire from other men's pain. Sanaya kicked the door open with 1 boot, her rifle up. Clint stepped in behind her, smoke curling in after them like a vengeful spirit. Trask didn't reach for the pistols. Not yet. I heard Morrow got himself killed, he drawled. Figured whoever did it would come limping here next. Looks like I was right. Sanaya stepped closer. You branded girls like cattle, sold them across borders. Called it business. Trask shrugged. Better than leaving them to starve. You think the world's kind to runaways? Clint's voice cut in low. No, but we can sure as hell make it unkind to men like you. Trask reached slowly for a pistol. Sanaya's shot caught him in the shoulder before his fingers touched steel. He screamed, fell back, blood spreading across his fine coat. Clint strode forward, kicked the guns away, and hauled him to his feet. You'll stand trial, he said. Public, open and loud. You're going to sing every name that ever paid you. Trask spat blood. You think 1 Apache girl and a half-dead cowboy can bring down men in Congress? They'll kill you before you get to the courthouse. Sanaya raised her knife. Then we'll die swinging. Clint pulled out the folded bounty letter, the one marked with the syndicate seal, and set it aflame in Trask's lamp. That's the last contract you'll write. Outside, flames lit the sky. The depot was burning, but the girls were safe, the guards disarmed, and the rain of fire was ending. 1 monster down. The courthouse in Tucson was packed to the rafters. Every newspaperman from the territory squeezed in to see the day Rufus Trask stood in chains, guarded by soldiers, brought low by a girl he once thought too broken to fight back. Sanaya stood before the judge in a simple blue dress. Clint beside her, clean-shaven for the first time in years, his coat patched but shoulders straight. The courtroom listened in silence as she named every man who bought and sold under Trask's command, one by one. No trembling in her voice, just fire. When it was over, the judge, an old Union man with tired eyes, nodded and spoke loud enough for every ear to hear. Let the record show, justice rides with those who make their stand. Trask was sentenced to life, and though some feared the syndicate would strike back, none dared challenge the tide that followed. Too many people had heard Sanaya's voice. Too many now knew what she'd survived. A week later, Clint and Sanaya returned to the hills. Not to rebuild a ranch, not to chase revenge, but to build something new. An outpost in Sonora, a safe path for the broken, the hunted, and the brave. Word spread slow, but it spread true. There was a place in the mountains where chains were cut, not forged. Clint built the cabins. Sanaya taught the children to shoot straight and speak louder than their fear. And some nights, by firelight, she'd tell them her story, not for pity, but for pride. Because she didn't just survive the storm, she turned and faced it. And somewhere on a high ridge, Clint Holt would smile, rifle across his lap, knowing he hadn't just saved a girl in the dust. He'd saved himself, too.